Where does yesterday's future, which is already here, meet today's future, which is about to happen, and tomorrow's future, which could be just minutes away? Welcome to Technology Revolution, the future of now. Where host Bonnie D. Graham asks savvy futurists for their predictions about the tech-driven trends that are shaping our future right now. Here's your host, who will take us into the future of now, Bonnie D. Graham.
Yes, we're going into the future. We're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to millions of people over the world: books, novels, publishing. How do you get your reading material? Let me read you a couple of statistics. I have a wonderful panel, I have to tell you. I've known one of my panelists for 15 years. We've stayed in touch, which is a marvelous thing. She's a publisher. We have an ad man turned almost novelist. I don't know if his book is ready. And we have a serial novelist, and you're going to hear some really interesting predictions from them. So we're just thrilled to have them. I'll tell you who they are in just a second. Here's a quote from Statista.com. The book industry has faced challenges ranging from the increased popularity of digital media to the hardships faced by retail bookstores. But in the U.S., books remain an important part of consumers' daily lives. Here we go. Print book sales have improved over the last 5 years, and in 2019, unit sales topped 650 million. The average yearly spend on reading among U.S. consumers was over $90 in 2019. Lynn, come back. There we go. I want to make sure $90. Is that a lot of money for people to spend on books in 1 year, Lynn? This is Lynn Vannucci. She'll introduce herself in a second. Lynn, is $90 a good amount of money, or is that low? Just quickly.
That's very low. It's low.
Okay, good. We'll get more from you. Okay. Print remains the most popular book format among U.S. consumers, and Lynn should know she's a publisher, with more than 65% of adults have read a print book in the last 12 months. Interesting. Meanwhile, and this is something near and dear to Joe Calderwood, one of our panelists, audiobook sales in 2019 generated over $1 billion in revenue, and the numbers of titles produced grew year on year. In 2018, 2 years ago, a total of 1.68 million print and ebooks were published. And here's the breakdown. Of that 1.68 million, 1.5 were print and 130,000 were ebooks. So there, I'm just going to stop and say our topic today is the future of the novel. Writers, publishing, and of course, technology. I am Bonnie D. Graham, and thank you to the gentleman who introduced me. His name is Ryan Treasure. He's the VP, I say, of everything at Voice America World Talk Radio. We're on the Business Channel. It is November 18th, 2020. Can't wait for this year to be over. Let's introduce my panelists. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We're on Zoom. I have the pleasure of seeing Joe. I call this nuanced radio because I can watch you talk and watch you think. So there. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, and we'll find out what is their relationship to this topic. But I gave you some clues. Lynn Vannucci, you're up first. Lynn, talk to us. Who are you? Tell everybody.
Hi, Bonnie. Lynn Vannucci. I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief at Water Street Press. I've been in the business for a long, long time. My first novel was published by Bantam back in 1986, so I'm older than dirt.
No, you're not.
I have also been a ghostwriter, and as well as a novelist, and I am also an editor. And I have been editing books, and I found some really, truly, this was maybe 10 years ago. Found some really wonderful books that I loved, that I thought deserved to have a publisher, and edited them for the authors, and they were sent out, and they weren't getting picked up. They weren't getting purchased by publishers. And I thought that one of the reasons was that they were just so niche, or they were a little quirky. And I thought, could I start something where we could give these books a home? And technology allowed me to figure out how to do that. And I'm so happy that I was able to do that, because I love books, I love writing, I love writers, love talking to writers, and love bringing just wonderful narrative, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, into the world.
Thank you. And Lynn, people are still reading books, and we're always going to read books. Don't we love to pick up a book in our hands, a physical book? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's funny. I'll just tell you that in my experience, what I find is that older folks like us
Hello.
like us, we boomers, we tend to we have adapted to the technology. We read ebooks, we read on Kindles, we read on our iPads. What I'm finding is that it's the millennials and Zoomers who like their print books. Those are the folks who want their print books the most. So it's kind of interesting, but yeah, there will always be print books, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Lynn, your company, Water Street Press, you want to just briefly tell us the origin of Water Street? Because I know there's a family tie there.
Yeah, my brother is my partner. My brother's an attorney. And when I decided to start Water Street Press, I talked with him and he became one of my partners. And we grew up on Water Street. We were casting around for a name, all kinds of different names that we were thinking about. And we both said, well, we grew up on Water Street. That's where we learned to love to read. So it became Water Street Press.
Love it. Sometimes we search far and wide for mystical, magical names for things, and they're sitting right there in front of you. On that note, thank you, Lynn. I know you have a little bit of a cold, Lynn, and I'm so happy you are braving the airwaves to be with me today. You and I go so far back. You were the ghostwriter or the co-author of Revolution in the Garden, the autobiography of Del Williams.
I started out as a ghostwriter, and Dell and I just became fast friends. And she said she wanted my name on the book because I had helped her so much. So it was really Dell's generosity that put my name on that book.
So full disclosure, Lynn was on one of my author interview shows called Read My Lips Radio about 15 years ago, talking about Dell's book, and we've stayed in touch, as I mentioned. Arthur Vibert is our next panelist. Arthur, so happy to see you again. I think I'm seeing you for the first time because I didn't do radio on Zoom until this year. You have such an interesting and eclectic background. I hope that's okay if I say that word. You've done so much. Arthur, why don't you introduce yourself to my global listeners? They'd love to get to know you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Arthur Vibert is my name, and I'm from the Bay Area, although I've lived all over the world. The first part of my career I spent working in advertising as an art director. I went to art school and all that, so it's my background there. And creative director, I worked on things like the Max Headroom campaign for Coca-Cola and the Saturn launch campaign when the Saturn car was originally launched, and I worked on Levi's and a bunch of other big names. I also worked on a lot of tiny brands that it's interesting to work on both ends of that spectrum. So, you deal with millions of dollars on one hand, and the other hand, you're dealing with a little tiny amount of money, and it's always a challenge to figure out how to do it, but it's part of being creative. And after that, I also worked in video production for about 20 years with clients like Apple and Mozilla and some big law firms here in the Bay Area. But I think the one thing that's kind of been consistent in my life is that I've always worked in creative endeavors of one sort or another. It's always been kind of the core principle in what I do. More recently, I've been doing a lot of writing. We've actually talked already about a book that hopefully will be coming out soon. It's called Creativity and Innovation, a user guide. And that's been a really interesting process. We just made a small addition to it because of COVID, so we've kind of updated it just because it seems appropriate for this crazy year. And the other thing about me that's important to know is I'm an avid reader. I found that I laughed when you mentioned that $90 a year yes. book number. I was like, I can do that in a day easily. So, yeah, I read a lot. I read everything too: Kindle, real books. I read graphic novels. I always love to see people experimenting and trying new things. And for me, that's all part of the fun of it. And I'm fascinated by the whole process of how we consume everything, really, of any kind of entertainment. So, including books, novels, movies, all that kind of stuff. So, I love all that stuff.
Thank you, Arthur. So happy to see you for the first time and be with you again. What do you think? Are we going to? You're writing? Are you writing a novel too, Arthur? I thought I saw that in your bio.
I am.
You're writing a novel. Is it exciting to enter the world of novels? Will it be a thriller like the ones that Joe writes?
I don't know if I would call it a thriller. Maybe I'm having a hard time deciding exactly how to define it. Right now, I'm in the process of of doing the classic thing. I made the classic mistake of doing too much telling and not enough showing. So I'm doing one more pass through it to make sure I'm showing and not telling. So that's been fun. But aside from that, it has a lot of. It's exciting, I would definitely say. Although it draws on my experience in advertising. So. It's like I'm doing a little bit of what I know, what I'm familiar with, but that creates a background for a unexpected development. I don't want to give away too much just now.
Thank you very much, Joe Calderwood. Thank you. Joe, come front and center. I'm putting you on speaker view. Introduce yourself to my audience, please. Joe Calderwood.
Thank you. I'm Joe Calderwood. I'm originally from the agricultural area of Miami. Grew up on about 50 to 60 acres, avocados, limes, citrus. My father was an agricultural person, packing houses. Anyway, grew up there, and we actually were poor, you'd think. But that was not Miami. It was the agricultural area. So I grew up there, went to college, Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, got a degree, BBA with a major in accounting, because we had a CPA come to school when I was in 10th grade, and my best friend and I thought, this guy looked like he had some money, so maybe that's what we like math. Maybe we'll do that. Isn't that crazy? Anyway,
I love it.
That's how it all started. I also wanted to be an airline pilot, blah, 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 that went on. That's not going to work, so I'll be the CPA. I can't kill anybody doing that. So graduated in Florida Atlantic in 71. I was working got a job with a CPA firm in my hometown of Homestead, closer to the Redland area where I grew up, and started out. And what happened is, I've thought about this quite a bit, is I call myself a serial entrepreneur. I've had 9 businesses since I started my first CPA practice in 1973, which is hard to believe that was 47 years ago. I don't even think I'm 47 years old.
You're not. Today you're not, Joe. It's okay.
But started that, and what could be better? I have all these business people as clients, and I'm thinking, well, how did you come up with this? Why did you want to have this kind of business? And I became a consultant more than anything, because I'd say, yeah, if you did this in the business, this may work better. Well, I ended up most of my life from that first CPA practice, after about 4 years into it, I've owned 2 businesses at the same time. In fact, right now, I have a business in England, which is an IT business. I was just on the Skype call, well, actually a Zoom call with my managing director over there. I have a 62-lot development here in Asheville, where I live, North Carolina. Was talking to my builder this morning. And I have a project in Florida I'm doing. And then I've written 3 books. This is just one of them, Money Faucet.
Hold it up hold it up steady, because Zoom is not picking it up. Hold up the book. There. Wait a minute. Tilt it a little. No green screen. We're not getting it. Okay.
I think it's because of the background I use. It doesn't do that. But anyway, so that's always interested me. And I tell people now that when I'm done with this development, I won't do another one. They say, sure. And I'll say, well, unless a really good deal came up. So it always would be something that I want to be productive. So I got into writing maybe over 10 years ago, interested in it. And I've written 3 novels in the Clint Kennedy series. And that's how I met Lynn Vannucci, of editing it and then publishing it. And, well, let's see. I got married finally. We've lived together 40 years, but it became legal by the Supreme Court 6 years ago. So
congratulations.
And life is good.
I'm glad life is good. I have a question for you, Joe. All the businesses you're in, all your travels around the world, I think Arthur was saying everything he's done, it all starts to inform the other things you do. The businesses you've run, the CPA work you've done, the investments you've made. Joe, are those part of how you structure the Clint Kennedy, the novels, the plots, the scenery? Talk to us a little bit about how that informs your writing. And these are thrillers, right?
Yeah, they're thrillers. So, yeah, how all of those experiences are somewhat mixed into how I started writing. I started writing this as a short story, and the short story turned into a long story, and then that turned into my writing teacher telling me I was going to have to pare it down. I said, no, I've got more to write. I just kept writing. And then when I met Lynn, I just sent it all to her and started sorting it out. So the variety of business people I met, some were crooks, some were top-notch, no gray area type business people. Plus, we moved to Merida, Mexico in 2005 and lived there 2.5 years. I restored. I'm also obsessive compulsive, which I like. So the first colonial house I bought, I ended up buying the one next door and the one behind it to make a compound. And that's where I met some writers while I was there. And so that experience added into all the stuff in my head when I finally took a writing class. And because I had a client that it turned out I thought was really a straight-laced guy, was dealing in pot. I wondered how he had so much cash to build a house for cash in 1976. And it dawned on me finally later. So, yeah, there were a mix of people I've met and personalities and ways they did it, made money legally, illegally, let's say, in places I've lived that kind of inspired it. Plus, my first boyfriend of 7 years, family owned a bank. And so I knew a lot more about banking than a lot of people. Even though I was a CPA, I was curious. Why would anybody even want to have a bank? You know, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of intricacies to banking. So that's how some of this stuff came about in the book.
Thank you, Joe. I've read your novels, and I'm always intrigued when I pick one up because your knowledge of architecture and design, your specificity on details of the characters, what they wear and how they move and what kind of liquor they have in their cabinet and what time they have their cocktail. See, I remember a lot of that, Joe. It's delightful to see through your writing through that lens of the scene and the place and the people. And you do it in such beautiful detail. I'm complimenting you, Joe Calderwood, because I've really, really enjoyed reading your novels. And Clint is quite an interesting guy. But I digress. Lynn, are you okay? Because I want to come to you next. Lynn is I see one hand coming up here. Lynn is suffering from a bad cold and you're, okay. You know what? I'm going to give you you want to do your quote now, Lynn, or should I go to Arthur? You ready?
Whatever. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay, she's ready. Okay, so this is a part of the show where I've asked my guests to send me a quote from a movie or a song, something they like, something they've heard about, something they've read or seen that has nothing to do with the topic, and they're briefly going to tell us what it has to do with the topic in their own world. So Lynn has sent us a quote from Chief Martin Brody. Everybody's thinking, who? Played by Roy Scheider in the 1975 thriller film, I'm not singing, I'm sorry, Jaws. And the line, actually, I won't read it yet, has gone down as one of the most iconic quotes in movie history, Lynn. It was ad-libbed by Roy Scheider, but according to the Hollywood Reporter, it had something to do with the cheapness of the production crew on the show. And I'm just going to read the line, and you're going to explain it to us. You're going to need a bigger boat. Love the line. One of the most famous, Lynn. So, Lynn, what does this have to do with our topic of the future of the novel, writers, publishing, everything? Go ahead, Lynn.
Well, first of all, I've always loved the quote because first of all, I guess I have a huge, long-lasting, decades-long crush on Roy Scheider. So, okay, so there's that. But also, I tend to be the kind of person who bites off more than they can chew, and then hopefully, God willing, chew that up and spit it out. But I think it applies because here in this situation, because of the technology. I mean, every day I'm finding new ways to find readers, new ways to produce books, to produce the new formats that the narrative comes in. So it's a matter of you just have to keep tap dancing and reading and learning. And so that's, I feel like that every day, that, I need a bigger brain. But
as a publisher, a writer, and editor, Lynn, do you think that publishing is going, well, we've established it's always going to be around, but do you think that the bigger boat would also be for we're going to need bigger bookshelves, especially now, whether it's space in your computer for ebooks, whether it's podcasts, audio books, whether it's print books, because we're probably doing a lot more reading now during COVID, and a lot of people are sequestered and isolated at home. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people, there's a lot more reading going on right now. People are looking for entertainment. So I think that the book sales will or do reflect that. Yeah. But in a normal situation, I don't think we'll need bigger bookshelves than we ever did, because people read what they read, although there's more people. So, but right now, yeah, it's huge. I think, and it could be one of the reasons why audiobooks are becoming so prevalent, because people are looking for ways to entertain themselves.
I'll tell you that when I was first doing my author interview radio show, the one you were on so many years ago, Lynn, I had my guests send me the hard copy of the book. Joe, can you imagine over 15, 20 years, the number of books I've collected in Arthur? So when I left New York, I had bookshelves upon bookshelves. When I left New York, I couldn't take all my books with me. But books to me are something you don't throw away. You might give them away and tell somebody, I hope you enjoy them. Libraries didn't want these books. Many of them were self-published. Many of them they weren't classics yet. Okay. So I gave some to a friend who's a tennis player on the public courts in Queens, New York. And he brought them to the court and he put them in the trunk of his car. And he said to his friends on the tennis court, I'm giving away free books. And he opened up his trunk and there were about 100 of the books I wanted to get rid of. They were gone in about 8 minutes. 100 books disappeared from his trunk. People were that eager, Lynn, to get their hands on. There were cookbooks and history books and novels and guides and you name it, all of the people I had interviewed over a period of years. But I did bring a lot of books with me, and my office here in Durham is filled with bookshelves again. Now I tell my guests, don't send me the hard copy. I want the ebook. I have a big hard drive here and I have room for the PDF or download the Kindle. However, let's move on. We're going to go to the quote Arthur Vibert. And Arthur sent a quote from Talking Heads, and the song is Life During Wartime. It's a song by the American new wave band Talking Heads, released as the first single from their 1979 album Fear of Music. It peaked at number 80 on the U.S. Billboard Pop Singles chart. And here is the quote, and Arthur will explain it to us. This ain't no party. This ain't no disco. This ain't no fooling around. No time for dancing or lovey-dovey. I ain't got time for that now. I hope I didn't murder that too badly. Arthur, rescue me. What does this have to do with our topic, please?
Well, it's just kind of a philosophy, a life philosophy, which I appreciate. It's, first of all, it's just a great song. I've always loved the Talking Heads. I just love their attitude and their kind of, surreal take on life and the world we exist in. And even though that was 40 years ago now, just over 40 years ago, it's still very appropriate, especially in this day and age of COVID and bizarre politics and all the rest of it. But, for me, it's kind of it's kind of a philosophy with a smile. There's the whole song I could have quoted really because it's just exceptional. But that part of it I think kind of sums it up, and I just feel like it gives a real sense of attitude you have to take into living in this strange world we inhabit, and how you get from day to day, how you do the things you do, how you make the things you make, and especially when it comes to our topic, I think that, it's an attitude of everything's changing, constantly changing. We are all, trying to change, to go with the flow as much as possible. And you just make it happen because what's the choice?
What's the choice? Excuse me. And you know what? Music, movies, books, they're keeping us afloat, aren't they, Arthur? They're
Indeed.
They're keeping us alive. The entertainment value, whether we do it for inspiration or for knowledge or just spacing out and going with Joe Calderwood to Merida and going into the ruins or going into a compound that's becoming a school or going into a bank and learning about the ins and outs of money laundering and the drug trade. Oh, my. Okay, let's go to Joe. I have summoned you. Joe has sent us a quote from the character Ennis Del Mar, played by the late, very very great. Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger was an Australian actor, photographer, and music video director for his portrayal of Ines Del Mar in the movie Brokeback Mountain. He won the New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Actor and the Best International Actor Award from the Australian Film Institute, the first time any actor won it posthumously. He died at 29, I think. Brokeback Mountain, in case anybody doesn't know, you probably want to see it. It's a 2005 American romantic drama directed by Ang Lee, adapted from the 1997 short story of the same name by Annie Proulx. That's all I'm going to say. Here is the quote. If you can't fix it, Jack, you got to stand it. Joe, this sounds very deep. You're going to have to help me out with this one. What does this mean?
Well, there's several quotes like that in the movie. It's just showing the simpleness of this character, Ennis, who speaks like that. So he's basically saying he can't follow his heart, where the other character, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, was following his heart. So it was this dynamic. And so that's what it means to me. That quote is follow your heart. What is in your heart and what is it you want to do? And whether it's writing books or publishing or whatever that is, or business, and how that relates to the topic of technology and the publishing world, I don't really know, but it is follow your heart. And I like that. And that's why when you asked for a quote, I thought, I don't want to just make something up. I like several quotes from that movie. And another one was like, I'm going to have to quit you, meaning this is going, in his mind, is going to destroy his life if he has this relationship with the other character played by Jake. So he's not willing, because it's a risky proposition in the 60s where that movie takes place. Well, it was a risky proposition in my third year of college when I was realizing I'm going to have to deal with this, and what I call navigating muddy waters, is people didn't accept it. And that was the main thing of this Brokeback Mountain, this love story that could not be fulfilled for both of them together.
And Joe, let's relate this, if you will, to novels. When you write a novel, sometimes the plot doesn't tie up all the little threads, does it, Lynn? And does it, Arthur? It's not in a neat bow, and there are huge, and it's the challenges that keep the reader interested, and they keep the movie watcher interested. Where will it go? How will it resolve? And I've been binging on Netflix series, Amazon Prime series during COVID. I've been through more series than I pick series with one-word names, most of them. Now I've run out of those. I'm on two-word names. But I'm thinking of the series as almost a novel, Joe, but I'm doing it a chapter at a time, versus if I watch a movie, I'm going to sit for 2.5 or 3 hours and watch the whole thing. So if I finish one episode and it's 45 minutes, I say, okay. And then 8 episodes later, well, that's going on a 6-hour movie. That's kind of long, but I like those cliffhangers. Will they or won't they? Will they quit? Will they stand it? So that sounds to me like a really good hook for a plot in a novel, Joe. Thank you all for the quotes. I really appreciate the time you put into that. Now is the time for our predictions, and we have a whole bunch of predictions here. And if you're just tuning in, this is Technology Revolution, the future of now. I am still Bonnie in the house, Bonnie D. Graham, and our topic is the future of the novel. Writers, publishing, and technology. What is happening with books? That's basically what we're talking about. If you don't own books, tisk, tisk, I'll just say that. They're wonderful. So you like that, Arthur. So I'm here on Zoom, and I get to see my wonderful panelists. We have Lynn Vannucci, who's a publisher, an author, a novelist, an editor. We have Arthur Vibert, who started in advertising, and were you one of the madmen, Arthur? Would you call yourself a madman?
Well, the Mad Men era was kind of the 50s and 60s, but I came in at the tail end of all that. You know, it was still it still is a heavily, it's a big drinking culture. That's just the reality of advertising.
And a lot of other things, too. I devoured that series, I think, in 6 weeks. I went through all 25 seasons, whatever, Mad Men. I loved it. I wasn't sure about the ending. But anyway, so Admin, he's writing a novel. He writes books on creativity. And Joe Calderwood, who is a CPA, an investor, a real estate developer, and a novelist, a very colorful novel. So those are my panelists today. I'm just really thrilled and honored to have the three of you here with me. Let's just go around the table quickly before we get to predictions. Lynn, what part of the country are you in right now?
I am in rural Pennsylvania.
Sit closer to your computer. We can't hear you.
I'm in rural Pennsylvania.
Rural Pennsylvania. Arthur, you are?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area in Marin County.
Okay. Joe Calderwood?
Asheville, North Carolina, Western North Carolina.
And I'm in Durham. Durham. One of my neighbors has DURM on her license plate. It's Durham, but I'm from New York, so we say Durham. Okay. So now we're going to do the predictions. Lynn, I'm going to read your first prediction, ask you to talk for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, as long as you can stand it. Lynn is suffering from a cold. I feel so bad, but you're doing great. So Lynn's first prediction, storytelling will remain the focus of novels. Lynn, why don't you take about a minute, if that's all you've gotten you, and tell us what this all means, and then I'll pick one from Arthur and one from Joe. We'll just keep cycling through the predictions. Lynn, you're up.
When you're looking for a book, when you're looking for a story, that's what you want, the story. It doesn't matter how it's delivered. It could be delivered on paper. It could be delivered on ebook. It could be an audiobook. It could be a slab with charcoal or scratchings on it. Human beings love story. It's how we make sense of our lives. So the story will always be there. The delivery methods will change, but the story is always the most important thing. And so, yes, the industry is changing. Yes, we need a bigger boat to handle everything that we have to learn. But essentially what it comes down to is, are the words, do the words move me? Do they make me react? Do they make my life better? Do they give me insight? Do they help me make sense of my life? Do they make me smile? Do they make me laugh? And that's the bottom line. And so, yes, it's changing, but it will always remain the same.
And Lynn, this has gotten so popular even in corporate cultures over the past few years, storytelling. And I know on my business shows, when I get bios from people now, they want to tell a story. They don't just say, my name is Bob Smith and I've had this job and these are my degrees. They tell a story, which is great if you're doing something for a presentation. But when you're printing a bio, I'm always searching for the name and the title and the company so I know whose it is. It's an interesting, it's a twist on how we used to write bios. So thank you, Lynn, for that. Arthur Vibert, prediction number 1. Being a successful writer will require establishing a cult of personality across multiple media platforms. Arthur, unpack that for me. There's a lot in that prediction. Go ahead. I love it. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the big changes between the way it used to be and the way it is now is that readers have a lot more access to writers. And I think that the writers that do the best job of getting involved with their readers do it through various media platforms, social media typically. And I think that the ones who are the most successful, especially the ones who really get engaged with their readers and so on, are really involved in social media. Now, the truth is, because I know this from my own experience, it's not easy. It's not something you can kind of just do in a half-assed way. You have to actually get in there. You have to engage with people. You have to, let them in. They have to get to know you. You have to be vulnerable. You have to reveal things about yourself and all that kind of stuff. It's like having a relationship with another person, except you're doing it with a lot of other persons. And it takes time and effort and energy and creativity. And but I think it's really the secret to success for any writer at this stage, or for that matter, anybody who's engaged in developing any kind of content, whatever it might be. So it really is. It once upon a time, all that stuff would be done by a publishing house, and now I think it's terribly important, or the PR company, whatever else. But right now, I think it's terribly important for the writer themselves to actually engage personally with their readers.
And Arthur, I'm going to pick that apart a little bit. You said a cult of personality. I think you're talking about the persona, but a cult of personality, it rings true to me. So how did you intend the use of that word cult? It sounds very niche. Go ahead.
Well, I think you'll find that if we look through some of my other predictions, that that whole idea is people like to engage. They like to be part of something. They like to feel like they're a tribe. And I think that that's kind of what I mean by that. A cult, a tribe, or how there's different ways of describing this whole notion. But I think it comes down to, belonging to something. It's like all the people who belong to the Harry Potter world, or the people who belong to any number of other worlds like that. You kind of develop this universe, and people want to inhabit it. I mean, we see this with cosplay. I'm sure you're familiar with that whole world where people go and dress up like the characters, and they like to, they take it very seriously. They put a lot of energy and effort into it, and they all go together and hang out, and it's a thing, and it's fun. It's like a way of escaping and becoming a part of this whole other world, and that appears in video games, and it appears in all kinds of different sort of virtual universes. And I think that, as all this evolves, we're going to start to see crossover where books and movies and cosplay and video games and all these kind of things all become part of this world. I think what's unique about books is that it allows the reader to inject their own persona into that world. You create so much of the book, and that's why people often get disappointed when they see movies based on books, because that's not the world they thought it was going to be. It's very rare that you see that. I mean, one thing, it's interesting, Bonnie, you were talking a few minutes ago about Netflix and TV shows. One of my favorite, sort of guilty pleasure novels has been for years Queen's Gambit. And, hold
on. I devoured that. Did you love the way they did it was a limited series, 7 episodes, and the first one was over an hour. Did you enjoy that?
I loved it. And the reason I loved it is because it like fit perfectly my vision of the book from, and it's so rare. And
I didn't read the book, but I loved what they did. Go ahead.
Well, read the book, because the book's wonderful as well. I have it around. It's like this beat up old paperback that I refind occasionally. Oh, I got to read this again. So I've read it a bunch of times. Walter Tevis. It's excellent.
I have to look. The show is just so beautifully done. She was such a fascinating character as a little girl, as a teenager, and then as a grown up woman in her 20s. And the actress was like she was
phenomenal.
Like she was painted. The skin, the eyes, the look. It fascinated. It's about a young girl chess prodigy. That's all I'm going to say. Arthur, to your point, Joe, I'm coming to your first prediction in a second. But Arthur, to your point about people read the novel and then they see the movie, say, well, that wasn't how I pictured that character or that persona or that city or that house. Well, the same thing happened to me when we started getting music videos, because I'm a child of the rock and roll era, okay? And I would listen to a song and I would picture, what did the boy look like? What did the girl look like? Where was that car? Where did they go on their date? How did they break up? And then music videos, and they assaulted me with, that's not the boy who I was. That's not the car. That's not the rest. No, that's not what she was wearing. And they took away all of my imagination, just like you said, of building into a book. Joe, when I read your books, I see through your eyes. I see through the lens of your words, but I still see the face of the person as I imagine he or she would be. And you haven't taken that away from me. I know you want to make movies out of your books, but you've taken away that ability to insert your own imagination. And I would look at some of these videos and say, the singer looks like that? Okay, that voice is coming out of that face, and that would ruin everything. So I wasn't a big fan of that. American Bandstand, I watched that religiously, though. Joe Calderwood, your first prediction is very simply, print publishing will not go away. Joe, are you ready to stand behind your convictions on that one? Talk to me.
Yes, and of course, it's from my perspective. It was interesting listening to Arthur about rereading books. I just finished rereading a book. It's literary fiction. Elizabeth Stroud wrote 3. I've got them. One is called Olive Kittredge. It is, and they did make a HBO movie or something out of it. So, I like having my printed books, and a lot of my friends, same thing. We exchange books because we have an avid reader in here. I bet she buys 4 books a week.
Wow.
And we have a library we started in the clubhouse here of my development. And I'll go down there. Usually she'll give me the books and I'll bring them home. And I like reading the print. And I have a Kindle and I have app on my laptop, and I have 100 or more ebooks and some that I like there. But the printed book to me is way more interesting because I'll corner over a page that really speaks to me for a lot of reasons. Maybe even gives me ideas about something I want to write, but just how beautiful the writing is, something like that. And so it had been a few years, and I reread this. The Burgess Boys was another one she wrote. I feel like I'm in Shirley Falls, Maine, where this takes place. I don't even know if there is such a thing, but I can picture it. And I know if they made a movie out of it, it wouldn't be as beautiful as I see it, or the character, or the way the character expressed. So you as a reader are co-creating with that writer. Head what's going on. That writer put enough out there, and not too much, that it's forcing you to start thinking about things of that character and how would they look, maybe totally different than that Arthur wrote. So, but again, getting back to print publishing, probably 10 years ago, I think people would have predicted, ebooks are going to take over and nobody will ever buy a hardbound or paperback book again. And of the books that I've written, we've sold quite a few ebooks, but also a lot of people I'm around that I know wanted the actual printed book, and they waited. When is the printed one going to be out? Well, I got the ebook, but I want the printed one. I said, well, soon. So that's just my take.
Thank you. And I'm going to add another dimension to that. And I think Lynn especially will appreciate this. When I pick up a hard copy book, and I don't like paperbacks, they kind of flip through your hands and they don't open flat. And I like a book I can actually put on a desk or put on my lap, put in bed. But my point is that I like to touch the book. I like the feel of the paper. Is the cover, is it glossy?
Smell.
The smell of, right, the smell of print and the font that they picked and looking at it on the page. And is it a vintage type of paper or is it a semi-gloss paper? What is the paper? How did they construct the book? And I was reading. On it. Yes. And I never read them. And you know what? I was reading in one of the articles I used to introduce the show, and they said that it's amazing that we haven't talked about self-publishing. Lynn, I know that's another branch that you are a publisher, but a lot of people are self-publishing. And I've read that you can print books, have them printed that are really beautifully crafted, even if it's a print on demand. But we're not going to go there yet. Lynn, I'm ready for prediction number 2 from you. And this is interesting. You say short form will continue to grow in popularity. Would you please tell my audience what is short form? How do you define it, Lynn?
Short form can encompass anything from a novella to a short story to an essay to, the Kindle has a short form. I forget what they call it right now, but you can buy an 11-minute read. You can buy a 5-minute read. You can buy, I think Medium does the same thing where they'll tell you how many minutes. So you've got 5 minutes and you want to read an interesting article about politics or an interesting short story about, a thriller short story or whatever. And I think that I know that people read in shorter doses. It's a trend that people like reading shorter pieces, and that can also be shorter chapters within a novel. The styles change. I picked up a book that was written, I cannot remember the name of it. I think it's called The Queen's Cousin or something, that was written in the 1940s. And I could barely get through it because it was so flowery and so, it didn't fit with the way that I am geared to reading. What I've been raised on, it was, and I have no idea if the book was a hit back in the 40s. I don't know, but I like to pick up books that, from and read them to see what my grandmother read, what my, mom read. So I like to do that. But that's just an anecdotal example. People tend to have shorter attention spans these days. We have social media. We have little blurbs on our social media. And the better that we can format our work to appeal to the way people absorb information, the more chance we have of people liking what we do.
Thank you. Point very well taken. Go ahead, Arthur.
I was just going to say, Lynn, when you were talking about the shorter chapters, it reminded me of somebody referring to those as potato chip chapters, because, you can kind of snack on them.
Snackable content, we call it in the corporate world. I always hated that word, but I like the potato chip idea better. I read one of my favorite newspapers. I'm not going to talk about it on my phone in the morning. It comes in usually at, I think, 4 o'clock, 4:10 in the morning. It comes into my email and my phone. And sometimes it's not a matter of that it's on a phone, but the articles are so long. They just lose me. Sometimes they bury the lead. I'm talking about journalism. Just let me sidebar here for a second. And I'm looking at what the headline, I have to go down to 3 paragraphs to find how the headline was even used, what it meant. And today I opened up the paper. I was awake, unfortunately, at 4:30 in the morning and needed to distract myself. And I went and read, and every article was in and out. It was bing, 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 bing. And I said, did somebody on the editorial desk of this newspaper go to the writers and say, stop writing a novel. People want an article. They have other things to do. Tighten it up. Get to the point. And I'm looking, all of a sudden, I'm at the end of the article. I said, wow, a couple of days ago, that would have been 3 times as long. And I was happier. So, Lynn, to your point, even in news, we want it in shorter, consumable, I didn't say snackable, consumable potato chips. Arthur, I want to go to your prediction number 2. This is interesting. You say one-offs. You're going to define that for us, please. Will become even less common in the future as readers want to continue to explore and inhabit the worlds of their favorite characters. That sounds interesting. Arthur, unpack, please.
Okay, so one-offs is, just a novel that stands alone. It's, the characters are never revisited. The universe is never revisited. It's just, a novel, which is great. I mean, we have many of those that we love dearly and that have formed our lives and all that kind of thing. But the trend seems to be that people love to revisit the characters, get to know them even better. And this is something that's been around for a long time. It's not that someone just invented this recently, but I think it's becoming more and more and more important to people, and again, to use Harry Potter as an example, you grow up with him, you see him as he, as a young boy, and then he matures and he has different kinds of relationships and he learns different things, and, his life evolves over that time, and people engage in that. They grow up with him. A lot of kids learn to read with Harry Potter and, continued to inhabit that world and still refer to it and love it dearly. Even though the author has managed to get herself in some trouble recently. But yes. Even so, I think people still love Harry Potter dearly. So, and I think that's true for a lot of, especially this has been very common in the fantasy world and science fiction world, and also, of course, thriller world. I mean, Joe is doing this, obviously. I think it's smart because people get comfortable. They want to see how their favorite characters are doing. They want to know what they're up to. They want to see how they're evolving and what they're turning into. And it's like, I think one of the big differences is that, once upon a time, people treated these series more like the old way that television used to be, where you'd have a series about Kojak, for example. And even though the characters are familiar, they never evolved. The characters are always the same from one show to the next. Now when you watch a series, the characters evolve over time. You get to know them. You discover their idiosyncrasies. You find out, the relationships change. It's not always the same thing. They're always married to the same person. They're not the same kind of friends. Things happen to them, and they're just like in real life. And I think that's also what's happening in series, where, the characters just don't remain the same throughout the entire series. They become different. They evolve. Their personalities change as personalities do. So I think that, I think that has a lot to do with, how people are going to continue to be involved with books and, as I said earlier, all the things that are generated out of those books.
Thank you, Arthur. Very, very interesting. Joe, I'm going to look at prediction number 2 and 3. I think they go together nicely, so I'll read both. Big publishing will print more junk. Small publishers will win with quality. Lynn, I think he's talking about you. Lynn is struggling there, dear. So go ahead, Joe. I'm going to put you on full screen, and why don't you tell us what these two mean? I think they go together very well.
Yeah, so it could be me as a business person and maybe venturing out writing and seeing more of what goes on with books. I went to the BEA in New York City a couple years ago and just saw all of these publishers and writers with their stands and booths and things. It was pretty interesting. But generally, my opinion is on these bigger publishers, it's just a big business and they're going to print this junk that I used to think, oh my gosh, it's a New York Times bestseller. It must be really good. And I'd start reading and I'd think, how did this even get published? This person I told you that lives in here that gets 4 books a week, she gets a bunch of that stuff. Yep. I'll read like the first 3 pages and I'll think, even though it's that thick, what is this? Who even wrote it? Were there a bunch of college kids sitting around? They said, write me this whole thing while you're stoned and we'll put it in this book.
It would be better than that, Joe.
Yeah, it would be. Thank you. That's kind of why I came up with that as a prediction that the smaller publishers, so for them to survive, they've got to have books that are appealing that they can market to somebody to sell enough to stay in business. So there's they don't have name recognition necessarily, but they're going to have to build this up on quality. So that's why I think the smaller publishers will do much better than the big publishing house. The big publishing house will make money, but I think more people are discerning in what they want to read, whether it's ebooks or printed books of any kind, or audiobooks, that's what I believe from my experience and some of the younger people I'm around that I bump into that make me think, wow, these younger people are a lot smarter than I thought.
I think they are. And Joe, I have received books that were published by big houses in the past when I was getting hard copy books from one of my radio shows. And there was one particular case where I opened it up and read the first few pages. It had not been edited. There were typos everywhere in the forward in the first chapter. And I just, the only time I've ever thrown away a physical book, and this was a self-published book, when it was so poorly written, so discombobulated, it was trash. It wasn't the subject. It was just, I was so offended by the book that I didn't want to give it to anybody. I didn't want to burn it. I didn't want to give it. I didn't think it deserved to see another light of day. So I just threw it in the round file. Anyway, we are 2.5 minutes from the end of the show, and I have so enjoyed getting to spend this time with all of you. Lynn, I hope you feel better. You're my dear publishing friend, and I hope you'll all come back in the next year. I hope it's a better year. Arthur Vibert, I know how busy you are, and thank you for the time, and wish you all success. I want to get your books when they're ready. And Joe, is there another book on the horizon with you, Joe Calderwood?
Yeah, I'm working on a book called Navigating Muddy Waters, and takes place in my 3rd year of college when I realize I've got this extra little thing to deal with, and that is I'm gay. And that was 1969. Well, anyway, I wrote a lot of this. I haven't edited it yet, but because I'm doing a podcast for my Clint Kennedy series, starting with Staying Fortune, I've now worked on, because I can't have actors in my house, we're Zooming it, is I'm working on the podcast. I've already got 7 episodes of Navigating Muddy Waters. Well, while I'm reworking what I wrote, then I'm kind of editing it, and then eventually I'll have it edited by Lynn and publish it. But that's probably a year away. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, time is expansive, Lynn, isn't it, in the publishing business? It's not, we'll have it for you tomorrow. It's maybe in the next year, maybe in the year and a half, and it's a bigger time frame than most of us deal with. I want to thank Lynn Vannucci. Please, gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for Lynn for so many reasons. Lynn, you recruited Arthur and Joe for the show, and I'm so appreciative to you. I know everything going on. I'm sorry you don't feel well, but you were my champion today, Lynn. You sounded good, and you always have so much information to share, and I appreciate that you have started your Water Street Press for discerning readers and for authors of books that are looking for a quality cadre of books to be part of. And that's what you've done. And anybody wants to know, go to, what is it, waterstreetpressbooks.com, Lynn?
Exactly. Yes.
And take a look at the mission statement for Lynn. I think you'll appreciate that. Arthur Vibert, such a pleasure again. Anytime, Joe. Say hello to Gil, and I'm looking forward to more Clint Kennedy novels from you. Everybody say thank you to Aaron Keller, my engineer extraordinaire. Thank you, Aaron. Glad you're feeling better. And thank you to Ryan Treasure, the voice of the future of now. I'm Bonnie D. Graham, and here's my closing remarks. Here are my closing remarks. Thank you for tuning in to Technology Revolution, the future of now. If somebody says to you, the future's already here, you say to them, tisk, tisk, tisk. I know Arthur likes it when I say that. No. That was yesterday's future. Today's future didn't happen yet. And we're all here, and we're going to do our best to make it a better one. Heck yes. Be safe, be smart, be savvy, be careful, and be sane. Signing off, Bonnie out. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for Technology Revolution, the future of now. Mark your calendar to join host Bonnie D. Graham every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern on the Voice America Business Channel to hear how technology is impacting your future now.
Thanks again for listening